But we're going to take a moment now to say hello to composer Amanda Feery. Hi there, Amanda, and thank you for joining us on this program. And I wanted to introduce Amanda because she's writing an opera which we're in the middle of rehearsing and we're going to produce for film very shortly. And Amanda, of course, is the composer who is on our ABL Aviation Opera Studio and has been in that position for 2 years. As part of the program, she's already written us one piece, which was premiered last year in January. And now we have the second piece, which is larger and more substantial, and is a culmination, really, of the 2 years on the program. And Amanda, I just wanted to ask you, you've obviously a background, you've written lots of other music before you turned to opera. What drew you to opera, and what drew you to want to be part of our studio and to be part of the INO family in the first place?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here this evening. Um, for a long time, I wanted to do some kind of theatre work or some kind of work that incorporated not only vocal instrumental forces, but also visuals and theatrics. And for years, I was thinking I wanted to do a project like this without even saying I want to do an opera. It was just a project. I had different stories in mind, and there was different characters, fictional and non-fictional. I was interested in opening up and exploring, but I was still calling it sort of a collaborative work rather than saying I'd like to explore an opera. So it took me a while to sort of admit it to myself that that's kind of what I wanted to do. Um, and I guess I have sort of I guess I had not notions about what an opera had to be, and that maybe that's why I wasn't calling a project like this that I wanted to work on an opera. I sort of had ideas that an opera had to have a certain structure that it followed. Um, but now, I mean, since being in the studio and working on this opera that we're currently rehearsing, I mean, and exploring more repertoire and more operas, um, obviously, I think that completely my experience has completely opened up in what an opera can be. And there was actually I'm a fan of Robert Ashley, and I think there was an interview of his from a few years ago where he just said, if you think it's an opera, it's an opera. It's like, to be really broad and general about it. It's like, if that's what you want it to be and what you think it is, then it is an opera. So
Great. Well, we're delighted you're writing operas. And tell us a little bit then about. So we just started rehearsing on Wednesday this week. The opera is called The Thing I Cannot Name. So obviously you've been working on it for a long time to get it to this point where it's in a rehearsal room. It's a huge amount of work for any opera. And when you first of all think I'm going to write an opera, or somebody asks you to write an opera, or the opportunity arises, it could be quite a perplexing. Where do you start? Where did you start, and how did you come to choose this subject?
I I really wanted, again, it was sort of thinking of a sort of collaborative work, in terms of what subject matter, what story, a person or situation I'd focus on. And it was quite, I guess it was started really broad, as kind of long-term projects do start, and then it starts to be kind of honed in. Um, I, for a long time, wanted to get some project going around female desire, um, and then in this very broad sense, and what that means. Um, and a thing I cannot name is that in the broad sense, but the three different characters in the opera, we look at female desire from three quite different angles. So at the very beginning, I wasn't sure exactly what kind of female desire I wanted to focus on, because there's different situations and different stories. Um, and obviously, with the help of our brilliant librettist, we focused on what we'd really like to kind of dig open in terms of the three characters. The librettist is Megan Nolan, who's a writer and journalist. And I guess it's no exaggeration when I say that Megan is kind of the dream writer I had for this project. She really was. I've been following her writing for a number of years now, sort of short stories and then her journalism as well. And I was incredibly drawn to her work because she can pull these very nebulous feelings that are maybe hard to describe, and are so fleeting sometimes as well. She has this amazing way of just making sense of these feelings and making sense of expressing them. And she has poured this theme into a lot of her work as well: desire and the kind of ugly sides of it, the lust of it, infatuation, lots of different angles to desire. So I just thought she is the person for this project. And then in terms of how we got to where we are now, in terms of the three characters that are involved in this opera, we want to focus on one kind of involves sexual desire. A second is sort of desire for another woman's life, coveting another woman's life. And then the third is definitely a very female subject in the desire for motherhood, the desire to have a child. So these three characters are very different. They're at very different life stages as well, in age. And I guess the early premise of the opera was that, and you'll see it when it comes to life and when it's released, that it is all centered in the one flat at different time periods. So it's 2008, 2015, and 2019. So these women are renting this flat on a busy Dublin street over these different periods of time. And we basically see them reflect on their situations and reflect on their feelings. I'm thinking more large scale operas in terms of their narrative can go over weeks, years. The story can be maybe a longer length of time, but with A Thing I Cannot Name, it's actually only sort of reflections over a few minutes of intense feelings. So it's quite real time in that sense, if that makes sense. So it's New Year's Eve is the sort of premise and setup, and it's not too long before midnight on New Year's Eve. So this Dublin is sort of, there's an energy around it in terms of the countdown to New Year's Eve, but none of these women are out with other people or celebrating or doing anything. They're all in their flats, and we hear them reflect on their different situations. And I suppose in terms of, I guess, with female desire, there can be maybe thoughts around there being a desperation to that sometimes, but I think these three characters, none of them are doomed and none of them are desperate. It just happens to be the opera is a sort of snapshot of a particular moment where these feelings are quite intense. So the pace of it kind of reflects that feeling.
Yeah, wow. It's fantastic to get such an insight. Thank you. And it's making me want to see it even more. And as you're talking, I mean, this is coincidental that we just listened to three arias from the Rosenkavalier, where the subject of female desire is a really important part of the subject, and also the subject of the passing of time, which is really quite interesting. But just Amanda, one last quick question. I often feel for composers who spend, of everybody involved in putting on an opera, I think composers probably spend the most time invested in what is happening. And then you have to hand your composition over to singers, to a director, designer, conductor. all those other people, and they may have other views about it, or different views. I know we're only on day three of rehearsals, but I just wonder, is there anything in the process so far that has surprised you about, or that might go in a different direction to what you would have imagined?
Um, so yeah, it's all been this week, so it's all being sort of kind of intense, but also super exciting as well that it's all coming together. In terms of the set and the lighting, I think the singers and Elaine Kelly, the conductor, Nifa Spillane director, have had different sort of angles to maybe a particular line of text. So I've given certain directions in the score, um, but not specifics about exact delivery of a line, for example. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but they've had different kind of views and sort of bringing out sort of different subtexts, for example, or not feelings that maybe are expressed directly in the text that I suppose when setting it, you can be sort of at a distance when you're so focused on a particular line, especially as a composer, because there's the practicalities as well as, focusing on breathing and register and things like that. There may be things that you aren't thinking about or not considering. So they've had some really interesting kind of opinions and viewpoints of how to deliver and how to direction to go with certain lines. Um, there's in my score in terms of the electronic part, there's um, sort of a dusky pink synth is of sort of kind of dreaminess that I wanted to associate with nighttime. So that's really a motif for quiet and night,
Mm-hmm.
and reflection. And I think the lighting is going to be really exciting at how it's paired with the timbre of that synth, the kind of
Mm-hmm.
glow of the lighting and the street lighting and the lighting of the flat as well. Um, I I wasn't so much surprised, but just really excited by that, where the direction where the lighting is going as well.